Come on in, everyone. Come on in because we are back, y'all. Can you believe it? We are back for a discussion about this ultimatum and the interview that Sandy and Nick did on the Nick Viall's YouTube channel. Now, who would have known I'd be coming back talking about this? But one thing that has happened is I'm back in my comments, y'all. I love to read the comments. And I really couldn't believe that throughout the comments, I was like this little old person sitting on an island all by herself that really thought that Nick was the bigger problem with Sandy. There are so many people who don't like Sandy. And honestly, y'all, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I hear a lot of what y'all are saying, but a lot of what y'all are saying, I feel like there's no real proof behind it. Like I hear that there's a whole lot of talk about Sandy's manipulative, but I'm like, manipulating who and for what? Right? Like if people are going to manipulate you, they're manipulating you in order to get something from you. What was Sandy getting from both JR or Nick? Because let me tell you, she was losing on both fronts. So I don't know what type of manipulation game you guys say she had, because whatever she had, it didn't work. Because you know what, to be honest with you, I'm gonna go straight to the punch. I think a lot of people don't like Sandy because they look at her as like this homewrecker. Like somehow or another, she came in as this, I don't know, female vixen. I don't know if she's a vixen. She's not really a vixen, but this female that came in and stole JR from Zaina. But I thought most people would have realized now that JR didn't even belong to Zaina in the first place, even when he got here. So Sandy didn't do no stealing of JR. In fact, JR was the more one that crafted this whole hall pass thing. And in fact, in the end, it was actually Sandy who was the one that kind of got tricked by JR, because JR was the one running around talking about he just wanted a hall pass with anyone. And you know what? If he could get a hall pass with a white woman that he had never slept with, he would try that too. Even though I tell you before, I don't believe it. I don't believe that Sandy was JR's first white woman. Just like I don't believe this is the first time that JR has cheated or kissed a girl or flirted with a girl. JR has been doing this. So in the hate for Sandy, you would have to be believing two people. For you really to believe that Sandy is manipulative and she's all these things you hear in the comments, you would have to believe JR's story, right? And who's believing that? And you would also have to believe a lot of Nick's story, right? But here's the thing. If you want to believe Nick's story, then believe his story. Believe the story that he tells. Don't believe the story that people have sort of made up in their head about Nick. So I want to go through why I believe Nick's the problem. Nick is the bigger problem. Now, let's get it straight. Let's absolutely get it straight. I am not here to say that Sandy is an angel or she didn't do anything wrong or that there weren't things she could do differently. Absolutely. It was like everyone else on the show. I went down in my original video, if any of you didn't watch it from the reunion, I went down the list of what everyone could do differently, including Sandy. And one of the things I said about Sandy was that Sandy has a need to sort of fix things and heal people. And as a result, she is attracted to broken men. She is attracted to broken men. And we're going to get into it. We're even going to be showing like some clips along the way of the Nick Viall show. So I hope you'll stick with me. But first, I want to lay out, because y'all know I like to lay out a case. I like to lay out a case. I want to lay out my case in which I'm saying that of the two, Nick is absolutely the bigger problem by far. And I'm not talking about just by a smidgen. I'm not talking about, oh, they're both bad. And let's say Nick is slightly worse than Sandy. No, I'm talking about by a long shot, y'all, a long shot. Now, when I was watching the Nick Viall's interview, I will say this. Sandy's style of communication is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. She talks in circles. She's not very good at expressing what her thoughts are. And I think as a result, people think she comes off as disingenuous, as if she is a liar or something. And I don't think that's the case. I just think that she has very, very, very poor communication skills, because I think a lot of what Sandy happens in Sandy's head is she is trying to balance her heart and her head. Like I said, Sandy is attracted to the wounded, and that is her heart part. But her head knows she shouldn't be in a relationship with this person. Sandy knows she should have never been with Nick, and she knew later on she should have never been with JR. But like I said, she's attracted to the wounded. So she's getting pulled by one part of herself, even though her head is telling her not to. And what I want Sandy to do as she grows older in life, and this is not just a message for Sandy, it's a message to any woman who finds himself in the dilemma of Sandy, which is being in love with a man that is a drain on you, that you shouldn't be with, and having this need to save people, that you have to start listening more to your head. When you are a person like that, you have to sometimes overrule your heart and listen to your head. Some head people sometimes need to overrule their head and listen to their heart. So let me tell you this. This is what, first of all, this is just crazy, y'all, to think about, like, that I'm even here at this point trying to say why I think that Sandy is 10 times worse than, not Sandy, Nick is 10 times worse than Sandy. First of all, let's just go with the age thing. We're dealing with a man who is 38 years old, damn near 40 years old. That's Nick. Versus Sandy, who is 27 years old. That is a huge age difference when you're in that age bracket. Now, so that is 11 years age difference. Now, 11 years age difference may not be a big deal when a woman is 40 and a man is 51. But when you are 27, you are below 30, and you have another person who's about to bump up on 40, that is a big difference, y'all. It's almost like, let's calculate this in dog years. We might as well talk about dog years. That is a big difference. So first of all, I have a problem with that, first off, by the audience, putting more pressure, putting more weight on Sandy, responsibility, accountability on Sandy at 27 than on Nick at 40 years old. So first off the bat, if I say, just giving off the age factor, who do I expect more from? I expect more from Nick. Does it absolve Sandy of responsibility or accountability? No, it doesn't. But right off the bat, a man who is 38 years old, who has said he's lived out here in the world, that's what Nick has told us. He's lived his life in California and LA. Then you know what? You should have had more control over yourself than Sandy did. And as we see throughout this show, regardless of where people thought Sandy made mistakes and she didn't control herself, maybe in the area of lust with JR, that people thought, Nick was far worse at 38 years old. Far worse, okay? So that's the first point I want to bring up. The other part I want to bring up is you got to remember what Nick's purpose was to bring Sandy on the show. He's a 38-year-old man who has said he has lived his life in California, LA, been there, done that, has already lived that fast life, the life that Sandy is still in the middle of, right? And what he wanted to do was pull her out of the city, out of LA, out of the glitz, out of the glamour, out of the clubs, out of the nice restaurants. And he wanted to move her out somewhere far out where there's a lake so that he can darn near be in retirement.
Sandy was in a position in her life where she's excited about LA, kind of culture, like she's immersed in a culture that I've kind of been a part of for a long time and was trying to pull back from.
So even if I look at on the level of expectations, who has the more realistic expectations in the relationship and who has the most unrealistic expectations in the relationship? I'm going to say that Nick does. Nick is a 38, darn near 40-year-old man, a woman who has been honest with him and said, hey, I'm not ready to move out to a lake, the countryside. This is LA, y'all. You know how far you got to move to get to a lake? You know how far out of the city she would be? She's saying, I don't want to do that at 27 years old. I haven't done all the things that you've done, Nick. I want to do more, and I'm not ready for that life. Yet you have a 38-year-old man bringing her on this show, which is the ultimatum, which brings me to my next point. On this interview, it was confessed. It was confessed, and that it was really Nick who initially first wanted to come on the show.
A lot of like you being like, you brought me here.
Right.
Which
he wanted to do it.
Okay. Did you not want to?
I mean, I was open to doing it, but I originally said no.
Okay.
I got reached out to and I declined. I was like, that's not something that I want to do. Our relationship.
It was Nick. Nick was the one that wanted to come on the show. Sandy at first was the one that didn't want to come, but then she said, okay, I'll come. I'll come and go on the show. There you have it. So the person who's supposed to be the wisest, the person who's supposed to have more maturity, the person who's supposed to have, should have lived more, seen more, have more discernment, have more better judgment than to come on a show like The Ultimatum, which most of us know is a hot, hot mess, right? Who was the one that wanted to come on the show? It was the older person, not the younger person. See, typically we're used to a younger person making these type of decisions. Why would a young person come on the show? Because young people don't really know. They don't know what could happen on a show like this because there's still a little bit of naivete to the young person. But the older person, we expect to know more. But in this particular case, it was the older person, Sandy, who was at least the first person to say, I don't know if that's appropriate for us to go on the show. Now, eventually she went on the show, right? Because she had an older person convincing her that, no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So who had the better judgment? Who had the initial better judgment between Nick and Sandy? And I'm going to say that Sandy did, even though she was more convinced and cajoled by the older Nick to go on the show. But once again, I'm giving the points to Sandy and I'm taking away the points from Nick. Now, the further down the line, I want to say that not only do we have a woman that's 27, he's 38, he's ready to darn near retire at the lake, she's ready to stay in the city. She didn't want him to come to the show, he wanted to come to the show. We find out from the Nick Viall's interview that Nick, not only from the Nick Viall's interview, but also from the reunion, so there's so much about it, that Nick is a self-confessed man who has had problems with not all alcohol, but also some form of drugs.
I definitely did not love how I handled myself that way.
More of this, less of what the other stuff I was drinking.
Yeah.
I would say, it's pretty clear, I think.
It wasn't clear, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Were you drinking a lot of alcohol?
Yeah, I wasn't sleeping.
Is that something you struggled with beforehand, or did kind of, it help you through the show?
So I've had my ebbs and flows with it. I think that I recognized through the experience that I needed to take a harder look at it.
Okay.
So now we got Sandy, 28, dealing with a 38-year-old man who has lived a life of partying already. And along in that life, he has developed an addiction, some form of an addiction to alcohol and some form of drugs. He confessed to it. He told us, but somehow or another, we are still saying that he is the victim and that Sandy somehow should have practiced or done something different, even though she's not the one coming to a relationship addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol. Make it make sense that Sandy is the manipulative one. Typically, the manipulator is the person on the drugs and alcohol. Let's be real. A lot of times, that's the person who's the manipulator. Not only has Nick confessed to abusing alcohol and abusing drugs, he said it was so bad that he checked himself into a rehab. He checked himself into a rehab, and he has also had to go through extensive counseling to sort of deal with some of the mental health issues he's been dealing with. alcohol, drugs, mental health. But yet here we are in the comments, talking about how Sandy is the bigger problem. What? You guys have got to be kidding me. How can you still be standing on this position that Sandy is the biggest manipulator, that she's the one doing the most damage, when I'm running down all these facts about Nick that not only, it's not even my thoughts. These are things that he has confessed to. These are things that have come out his own mouth. On the show, Sandy said that one of the reasons why she didn't want to come on the show was because their relationship was nowhere in a place where there should be even any question of whether or not they would get married or not get married.
Our relationship is not that serious to go into like a marriage proposal. And because we were very off and on in our relationship.
Okay.
And I think that's something to note. Him and I had not been dating for 2.5 years. We had known each other for 2.5 years. And we had been actually dating for about 9 months before going on the ultimatum. And within those 9 months, we had broken up maybe 5-6 times.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
That's what the 27-year-old had to tell a 38-year-old. Listen, there is no way our relationship is in a place where we should even be considering marriage. That's what the 27-year-old had to tell the 38-year-old. But the 38-year-old still wanted to come on the show. And the reason why the 27-year-old told him that was because what she said was, even though Nick and I have been dating for, I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years, it was never consistent. It was on and off. And really, they have broken up so many times. She said that for the last 9 months of the relationship, they had broken up about 6 of those times in the relationship. So given the history of the relationship, given the status of the relationship, it was a 27-year-old trying to bring some sober-mindedness to the decision to come on the show. But the 38-year-old said, damn with the sober-mindedness, damn with what makes sense, what's probably best. Let's just all chuck that through the side because I'm creative and I'm out here in LA. I'm a free spirit because I'm an artist. And what I do is I don't use my head as an artist. I just do whatever the hell I want to do. And I think we should still go on the show. And the 27-year-old said, yeah, that's part of the problem of our relationship because you've always done what you want to do. And that's why I always felt neglected in the relationship because you were an absentee boyfriend.
I was essentially an absent boyfriend moving into the show, right?
And is this just what Sandy is saying? No. The 30-year-old confesses, says, yeah, I was that absentee boyfriend. I didn't really want to come around much. I didn't want to go that many places with Sandy because we were in 2 different places. Okay.
And I think that I was pretty cut off from what she needed from me emotionally moving into the show.
I can see how you're in 2 different places because you're 11 years her junior. You're 11 years her senior. So yeah, I can see how you're drifting apart. I can see how you're not in alignment. And you couple this with alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health issues. Why are you guys together? But yet here you are on a show, and for some reason, a large portion of the Ultimatum audience is saying that Sandy is the bigger problem. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nick's flowery attitude about coming on the show, he's always going to be fun, came from Nick. This was also a thing that was discussed.
I went into it, I would say, maybe a little flippant and arrogant that it would be fun. And, we would kind of laugh about the experience and come back in this loving, oh my God, I missed you. And how could we do this? And obviously that didn't go down the way that I thought.
Yes. He was the one that came on the show, nonchalant, happy-go-lucky, because what he was thinking he was going to do was have a little fun on the show too. It was going to be fun. He said it himself. This is not any words coming from just Sandy. Once again, this is him admitting it. And where I believe it all went wrong was that the fact that when he came on the show, his experience turned out a lot different for 2 reasons. One is Sandy really did connect with JR. That was a big blow to his ego. That was a big blow to his self-confidence. to a man who's already mentally unstable, for a man that's already has a drinking problem and possibly another use of drug a use of drug problem. Like I said, I guess I could say allegedly, but he said it on the show. So I don't even know if I need to say allegedly, because this is what he has said. And so imagine all those triggers coming on the show, that you came on the show thinking you were going to be the one having all the fun. And it turns out that Sandy ended up being the one having all the fun. And now you're mad. Does that make Sandy a manipulative person? No, that doesn't make her manipulative. Just because it turned out that she ended up being the one having more fun than Nick. Well, let's figure out why Nick didn't have any fun. Let's talk about it. Nick didn't have any fun because the woman that he was paired out realized that he was crazy. So now you not only have the opinion of Sandy calling Nick the problem. Nick, you're the problem. You're the problem. I'm leaving the ultimatum. This is what Vanessa said. Vanessa said, once I got paired up with Nick, I realized that he was a big problem. And so I got the heck out of there. So Vanessa tells us, the audience, that Nick is the problem, but yet the audience is still talking about how much Sandy is the problem. Nick has also told us he's the problem, but yet everyone still wants to call Sandy the problem. And if that's not enough, we've got Mariah, who got to spend a lot of time with Nick, because Mariah also didn't get paired up with a person. And she has also told the audience and Sandy, Nick is the problem. I can see why you wouldn't want to marry him. He's not marriage material. But yet, everybody wants to be down the throats of Sandy. I really want to understand it, y'all. I want to understand why there is so much animosity towards Sandy. And the only thing I can come up with, y'all, is that there is a disdain for a woman that appears to break up a couple, because initially it looks like, wow, Sandy came into the picture and all of a sudden JR flipped from Zaina to Sandy, and like Sandy stole Zaina's man. But now that y'all know the truth, which I always knew the truth, Zaina and JR were not really a solid couple. They were not really together. When they came on this show, I'm telling you, right, when they came on this show, JR wasn't just looking for a hall pass. That's what people think. People think that JR was looking for a hall pass. JR was looking for a way out, a way out. He wanted to get out of the Zaina relationship, because you could tell the way that he was so reckless on the show with Zaina's feelings and not really caring what she saw, what she heard, or how she felt about it. He was reckless. It was almost as if, let me give Zaina all the reasons she needs to break up with me. And in the end, Zaina didn't even do it. She didn't even do it. JR still had to break up with Zaina. Think about it. JR went over here and fooled around with Sandy during the whole experiment. He disrespected Zaina. Zaina was running around acting like she was a wife before she was a wife. JR did all of this to Zaina. In the end, Zaina said, I still want to be with you. Why, Zaina? Because she just wanted to be a wife. She disregarded everything that JR was and still wanted to be a wife to him. And in the end, JR still had to reject Zaina. After all that went on prior to getting on the ultimatum, Zaina still wanted to be with JR. JR didn't just come on this show for a hall pass to sleep with a white woman. He came on this show so that he could get a hall pass for life from Zaina. And Zaina held on to this man to the very, very end. And in the end, JR had to basically what he did was tell her, I don't want to marry you now or never. We need to break up. So Sandy didn't break up JR and Zaina. Sandy did not steal JR from Sandy. She did not steal him from her. They were already broken up, period. And JR already had it in his mind when he came on this show that he was going to do whatever he needed to do. Like he said on the show, I'm on here to meet someone different. He said it. He said he wasn't on here to necessarily figure out if he should marry or not marry Zaina. He was on the show to meet someone different. That's why he was running around calling Sandy his wife. Now, let's go back to the other thing I disagree about from the audience. I disagree with the way that the audience has said Sandy should have handled JR during that time when Nick was having his full meltdown, not only on the couch, writhing, screaming, crying, all that, but also when he came to the apartment of JR. Now let's start with what I think JR did. Wrong. Okay, and I said that during my regular review of the show. JR was disrespectful. JR was rude. JR was cocky. JR was a lot of things. As most of you know, I do not like JR at all. And the way that he handled Nick in that moment was horrendous. I thought it was horrible. I don't think that he should have done it. But, and let me tell you, it's a big old but. It's a big old but. I have a problem with the fact that we have Nick, who on that night, even before we knew he was drinking, because now he's confessed on this Nick Viall show that he was stone cold drunk, he was drinking. He was also possibly taking some illicit drugs alongside of that. Then he told us on the show that actually the full meltdown wasn't even completely about Sandy. It was also about something else that was going on in his life with a whole nother person who he felt he was betrayed by or hurt by. So once again, we have Nick in a full emotional meltdown. And it's not even all over Sandy, right? He's drunk. He's possibly doing illicit drugs. He comes knocking on the door in this hysterical state. Now, Sandy has seen this before because she's told us she's seen it before. It's like I said before, this relationship has been toxic a long time. And I kept saying Sandy has been in a toxic relationship a long time and she needed to have left it long time ago. So when Nick comes to the door in this heightened state of drunkenness, possibly on drugs, full of emotion, prior to this moment, Nick has been calling Sandy incessantly on the phone. She's been trying to talk to him on the phone for hours to calm him down. It hasn't worked. He's still drinking. He's still taking drugs. He's still in a heightened emotional state, even though she's talked to him prior to this. That is not enough. His emotions can't be calmed. He can't be calmed down. He's in a frenzy. He's in a sort of crazy state. He comes knocking on the door. He is met by a rude, insensitive JR. I get it. But, and here's another big old but, what we believe, not we, because I don't believe it, what the audience has now said is, we expected Sandy, the 27-year-old. So Sandy is in a situation, a 27-year-old woman with a 38-year-old man who's drunk and on drugs and hysteria. She's also in the room with another man, JR, how old is JR? Let me look this up real quick. How old is JR? $33. So we've got Sandy, 27-year-old, in a situation with this man coming knocking on the door. JR, 33-year-old man who's coming knocking on this door. The man, yes, he is her boyfriend. Yes, she loves him, but he's out of control. He's out of control, okay? And what we expect, the pressure that I have seen this Ultimatum viewing audience say, that it was Sandy's responsibility to do two things. One is she should have checked JR in that moment. What? Okay. So Sandy should have not only managed her own emotions. Remember, she's the one caught in the middle between a JR and a Nick. But she should have, at 27 years old, handled her own emotions. Then what she should have done was go to JR, tell him about his emotions, handle him correctly, and tell him, hey, let me check you. Let me do this. Let me put you in your place because you're too much. You're disrespecting Nick. Then what she should have done is she should have also gone to Nick and coddled his feelings and showed him some empathy and sympathy. What? Listen, I'm way, way, way older than Sandy. And I'm going to tell you right now, even at my grown age, if I had been in a situation where Sandy was, right? And I've got JR sitting over here being disrespectful and mean, but yet I have a man that has shown up to my house, even if I love that man, shown up to my house drunk, on drugs, who has constantly been calling me all day. I do not feel the need to risk myself and insert myself in between a 38-year-old man and a 33-year-old man to save either one of them. You know what I'm doing? I'm saving my freaking self. That's who I'm saving. I'm not going to be the woman out here who's got to be strong and go around here and save everybody. I don't need to save JR for whatever mess he's about to get himself into. And I don't need to save Nick either. You know what I need to do? I'm now with Sandy. I need to go in the room, shut the door, cry, and call for help from somebody else. Maybe I need to call the producers. Why do I need to handle this mess between two toxic people? You got toxic JR, you got toxic Nick, and all of a sudden, it's Sandy's responsibility to handle all this toxic Nick at 27 years old. Absolutely not, people. Absolutely not. And I caution any woman, do not do it. Do not do it. Do not risk yourself to save Nick when you know that he's intoxicated. You see, when this episode was going on, I knew that JR was being rude to Nick. What I didn't also know about what was going on with Nick is that he had been drinking and was drunk and that he was also on drugs. I didn't know that part. So when I now realize that was going on, I completely understand the fear of Sandy. I completely understand her fear in that moment. It is a heightened sense of fear. And if I'm Sandy in that moment, I don't care what age I'm doing. If Sandy is my daughter, and my daughter explains to me, Mom, I was here with this guy and this other guy came, I would not tell my daughter to speak to JR when JR was already in a heightened mode too. He was ready to fight. And I would not tell my daughter to calm JR down. I would not tell my daughter to go anywhere with Nick at all. I would tell her, go in the room, lock the door, and call some help. That's what I would tell her to do. So I can't understand, after all this context and information that the Ultimatum audience has viewed, we are still calling Sandy the manipulative one. These men were trying to manipulate Sandy. They were both using their own emotional state to fight over Sandy. JR is pushing and pulling at Sandy, talking about, she's my wife, as if Sandy is an object. You got Nick over here showing up drunk, talking about, she's my girlfriend. Sandy's not an object. She's a person. She's a person. And neither one of these people were coming and fighting for Sandy in a loving way. They were coming and fighting for Sandy in an ownership way. It was as if they were trying to possess Sandy. Nick was trying to possess Sandy, and JR was trying to possess Sandy. That is not love, people. So why would Sandy be responsible for coddling Nick's emotions? He is not coming to her out of love. Give me a break. Give me a break, Ultimatum audience. Give me a break. If any of you have not watched the Nick Viall's interview, you need to go and watch it. You need to go and watch it. After you watch it, you can come back down in my comments. We can have some more conversation about it. Because like I said, one of my favorite parts of doing these videos is reading the comments, reading what other people think. But the only reason I came back is because my thought is so different from at least 80% of the audience out here. I had to say something about it. And as y'all know, the only time I come back to do a follow-up on a video is when I'm coming here to double down. Is when y'all know me, I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna let you know right now, I am doubling all the way down on the fact that Nick is the bigger problem. I understand that Sandy has her shortcomings. I absolutely understand that. Like I said, one is I think she's a very, very, very poor communicator. Very poor communicator. She needs to get better. That's part of her problem because she isn't a good communicator, which means she doesn't draw boundaries enough, which is why a lot of these men in her life, one is she attracts them because she looks like a woman that doesn't have any boundaries. And second, when she gets into a problem with these toxic men, she can't draw boundaries around them. She's got a lot of work she needs to do. But in terms of the ones who were the worst, no way is it Sandy. Absolutely not. Nick is the problem. Nick is absolutely the problem. Anyway, that's it, y'all. That's all I got to talk about. Talk to you later. Bye.